Oh my god. This is so many cannons. What? This is ridiculous. I need to have like a Terminator voice just sitting here saying,
You will be exterminated. Resistance is futile.
Alright, so welcome back everybody. So today I actually wanted to give some quick building tips about Leviathans. And this was actually just based on a community request, so by all means feel free if you have any video ideas that you want to see. By all means, I'll try to see what I can do. But I did record a large, like, hour segment of me talking about everything Leviathan related. And that didn't even scratch everything. So by all means, I want to do a quick little video here going over some basic tips that are going to be more concise and more geared towards what a newer player might expect. So let's go ahead and get right into that. Alright, so just some quick background information on what to actually expect and what environments your Leviathan is going to be in. So if you actually come over here to this crude drawing of what the Leviathan invasion map looks like, you will actually be on this kind of small-ish map with three little pillars that are sticking out of the ground, obscuring the main view of the base in the center in red here. Now this base is split up into three portions, so you can't really use the lances to instantaneously kill it. So the big thing you gotta note about this is that we're gonna have a lot of area in which your Leviathan's aim is going to be obscured, and a lot of area to drive in, as well as a lot of objectives to attack. So that is actually something to consider when building. So you actually don't want to have like a super slow Leviathan build with limited ammunition. You want to have something a little bit more mobile, and something a little bit more durable, and something that can last a little bit longer in combat. And with that, you also got to consider what enemies you're going to be facing. And you're often going to be facing enemies like this, that are small, low power score Leviathans that are going to have a lot of explosive damage and not really a whole lot of armor, and are mostly geared towards killing Leviathans. So with that in mind, you're going to actually have to build in a very particular fashion. And usually, you're going to want to utilize things like wheels as opposed to tracks, legs, and augers, or hovers. And the reason why that is the case is because tracks tend to be very slow, very beefy, and Leviathan AI is not very good at moving in these things. The more you actually look at AI and how they utilize tracks, sometimes they will come to a dead stop and try to do a 180. That is going to take forever, and then opens them up to a huge volley of fire from wasp or explosives or fire weapons. So generally you want to avoid these and utilize things like wheels. Even white wheels are certainly very effective because your Leviathan comes automatically with a buttload of tonnage and mass limit. So don't be afraid to utilize some wheels. Now another tip here is to what weapons you want to utilize here. So general rule of thumb is that you want to use a turreted weapon, and a turreted weapon just means that it can spin 360. The reason why you want to use that is because your Leviathan is often going to be spinning around in circles, moving, adjusting. So having weapons that can actually follow the track of the Leviathan is incredibly useful. And that's why a lot of people tend to use machine guns, but I would advise against that because for another tip, I'd recommend using weapons with more than 200 HP. And that's just because often explosive weapons do more than like 100, 150 damage per shot, especially if there's a large volley of them. So having higher durability weapons on more frames is definitely advised if you want to see more success with a lot of your survivable weapons. You can use things like caucuses. However, the best weapons to utilize are things like drones because you can easily hide them, and they have high durability, and are great against countering Leviathans. But turreted cannons are also a great option, like the Fat Man or Little Boy, or the Elephant, if you can afford it. Autocannons are also another great option. They're decently durable for the most part, and they have a great range. However, every other weapon I would sparingly use because of their limited use case or very low HP. Shotguns are only good at very close range, so they're often not utilized effectively. Missile launchers are usually too weak, such as the Wasp and Locust with less than 100 HP. Grenade launchers, a little bit harder to use, a little bit weaker. Energy weapons, okay if you can afford them and you have the space for it. Crossbows, melee weapons, don't really use them because if your Leviathan is anything else besides melee weapons, it will not utilize them effectively. Flamethrowers, again, not in melee range close enough. Mine layers, okay if you can afford them, however, unlikely. If you're using artillery, unlikely that your Leviathan will be able to utilize it effectively. It might be able to use mandrakes, but that's not power score efficient, so I'd be hesitant on that. And the special weapons, for the most part, your Leviathan will not be able to utilize it effectively. Maybe the Emilys and the adapters if you're being a little bit more adventurous, but by all means, feel free to experiment to see what works out well with you. I'd recommend using weapons that you're actually going to use, because any weapons tied up in your Leviathan will not be able to be sold on the market until your Leviathan is recalled and deconstructed. Now, another tip here is to make sure that you limit your generator and your ammunition, to limit your explosives on your car. And the reason why is because any sort of explosive or flame weapon will penetrate your car and can instantaneously pop these things. And if that happens, guess what? A large chunk of your interior will go bye-bye. And that's going to be 2,000 damage to your car. That could be a loss of 5 or 6 weapons. That can be a huge maiming to your overall build. So I'd be very sparingly. Ammunition is a separate use case, because if you use a lot of cannons or anything with ammunition, you are going to need to use a few of these to actually make sure that your car has enough ammunition to survive a fight. So maybe I would limit to yourself to maybe 1 or 2 ammunition packs or Genesis, depending if you use drones or cannons. While talking on modules, there are a few things to consider. For the most part, don't use fuel barrels, you don't earn anything. Always have a car jack on your Leviathan. It is super useful, especially if your Leviathan ever gets flipped over, which does happen, believe me, it does. I would also have a radar on your car, such as the Maxwell or the Doppler. Very effective, because you have to remember, AI in this game can only shoot things that it's actually on its radar. Otherwise, it can't tell enemy from foe, so it won't shoot. So having a radar like this is super effective. If you don't have the energy, at least pick up a Keen or a Listener or a Ruby. Those are also very effective weapons. Engines, I would recommend having as well. If you don't have the energy to spare, Hot Ride is a great engine to have, because it increases reload speed across the board, which is super nice. If you're using drones, it might be more effective to use a thing like a Cheetah. If you're using cannons and things like that, a Colossus or an Oppressor might be a great idea. If you're on tracks, a Golden Eagle might be an option, but like I said, I wouldn't recommend you using those. Coolers and chillers and other things like that are absolutely perfect things to have if you're using things like machine guns, auto cannons, or anything that overheats. So if you're using, say, a baloney ton of rapiers, by all means, throw in some chills, throw in some Tasmirs, throw in some shivers, throw in some seals, maybe 1 to 2 at maximum, and that should be the best bang for your buck. Because you also have to remember, the AI doesn't just like constantly fire it, it also tries to do burst firing occasionally too, so it may shoot for a couple of seconds and stave off, shoot, and then stave off. So having something that can just work well with it is great, but it won't, 100% utilize it all the time. So keep that in mind. As for cabins, really any cabin for a Leviathan will work. However, if you're trying to optimize your cabin for any reason whatsoever, by all means pick a cabin that benefits your weapon the most. So Harpy is great for explosion, Torero is great for all-around builds, Photon is great if you got energy weapons, same thing with the Quantum. The Call is great for any sort of drone build. When it comes to heavy cabins, any of the heavy cabins are good. Icebox is great for any limited angle weapons, if you use any, such as the cannons or defenders or whatnot. Echo is great for any reloading weapons, and Humpback is just great all around. Bastion is okay, but the damage resistance it provides itself on the train plow will not be utilized terribly all the time. And don't be afraid to use blue cabins as well. Blue cabins can just be as effective, since the majority of your Leviathan's power comes through its innate huge energy reserve. Now going over here to this lovely build section over here, we got a small starter Leviathan here, but I want to just explain a few things to you before we get started here. So if you come down here to underneath this lovely dovely car, you will notice that I have quite a few pieces here stuffed inside this frame. Because as you can see, I kind of have a circular frame built out here with a large hole in the center. And the reason why I want to do that is because this way I can actually hide a great deal of my explosive and sensitive components underneath my car. and that allows me to build up more and have a flatter overall build, which is great. A smaller Leviathan tends to do a little bit better against explosives, since it is harder to aim for. So with things like that, you can hide a lot of things in the floorboards here. So in this case, I hid the chameleon engine, radar, and a carjack, all necessary weapons, and I threw on a big G so that we had extra energy, but you could easily take that out too if you don't want it. And as you can see, I also chose to use the large wheels here so that we have a little bit of extra room underneath our car so that when we're driving, we're not hitting everything under the sun. But throwing everything back on here, let me just go ahead and explain a few things. So as you can see, I decided to use a lot of drones on my build here. And as you can see, I have some of the drones facing outward and some of the drones facing backwards so that all the drones don't plop down center square. So that is a good thing to utilize as well. And don't forget to armor up each of your drones as well as just kind of segment it. Because you have to remember, if a bullet comes in here or explosive comes in here, you don't want it to take out all of your drones here. You want there to be a little bit of cushion so that these drones can be safe and maybe even neighboring drones can be safe as well. So segmenting your interior is a great idea as well. Now continuing with that trend, we also segmented the Cobras and the Sidekicks out here so that we actually have a little bit of more space here to work with. So there's also a great option to have as well. Now, if you're going to put more explosive parts in here like a Genesis, I'd recommend putting it in areas where it's likely going to be protected. So in this case, I'm going to put it underneath here, since these areas I can hide quite nicely with, say, extra armor pieces. So it makes it quite easy to hide. So in this case, I can slot it right underneath my Jawbreaker, nice and hunky-dory, and then I can slap armor on the outside here to make that nice and protected. And that is super useful to have. Segment your explosives out here so that they don't instantaneously blow up all four of them at the exact same time. So here's actually a finished Leviathan that I use quite a bit here. And there are a few things that I would like to point out here that may be useful on your next build. So as you can see here, I have a lot of caucuses here. But as you can see, they're also well protected so that they don't instantaneously fall off. That is a big thing to consider whenever you're building a car. Also, to make sure that you have very sound structural support for your guns as well. So in this case, I'm using a gun mount, and the reason why that is because it's a super durable weapon and a super durable mount to go with it. So if this thing gets shot at, it's likely to stay on this car. Now, say if you don't have a gun mount, what you could do is that you could also mount your guns on two things at once. So in this case here, I have cords, but I mounted it on two small buggy floors, so that if one of the buggy floors falls out, the cord will actually have something to still stay on. So make sure you're redundant with your mounting points as well. And don't forget to have weapons facing behind your car and on the side of your car. You will often be moving your car quite a bit, or your AI will. So actually having something around all points of your car is going to be massively beneficial. Also, don't forget to layer the duck out of your car here. So adding on skirt armor left and right, recessing your wheels, adding in redundant armor parts here is definitely going to be a huge bonus here. So if I was to redesign this car here, maybe I would flare out the base more and try to add on some canvas roofs or more parts here to make this more durable and less likely to blow off the wheels. And maybe I would space out the armor a bit more, and that would be a great way to make yourself explosive resistant. So if I was to build a Leviathan like that, I would keep that in mind, because you have to remember, a lot of Leviathans you will face will be explosive oriented. But other than that, I think that is going to be my brief tip introduction here for Leviathans. I do have a larger video planned for this, so by all means keep an eye out for that. That'll probably be later on, because it's a lot of editing I gotta do there. But other than that, if you guys enjoyed here and you want to see any more tips about any sort of specific build, because this was a community requested feature, by all means, free feel to leave it down below. Other than that, feel free to follow whatever platform is your favorite. We're on Twitch and we're on YouTube. So by all means, follow whatever platform is your favorite. We do provide content to both. Other than that, there's Discord and Twitter down below if you want to get notified whenever I go live, as well as just join the community. We do fun stuff occasionally. Not really. Who knows? But on that, guys, I want to thank you all for joining this evening, and I'll see you next time, guys. Bye-bye.